Greetings, friends. My name is Elio Perez, and I want to welcome you to this edition of your Erizo TV podcast. Today, I happen to be in Southwest Florida and in the presence of the utilities engineer for the city of Fort Myers, Mr. Jason Sciandra. Jason, I want to welcome you to the program.
Thank you, Elliot. Really glad to be here. It's been a great interview.
I've been looking forward to talking to you, Jason. We met in the trenches of the consulting world back when you were in your consulting career. And I'm excited to see you at the city now. This is quite a change, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. I would like to begin this interview, Jason, with the origins. Where did it all start for Jason? How your childhood evolved, and how you got to the point that you decided, I'm going to be an engineer?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I've shared this with you before. You know, I spent my early childhood there, all the way through college there, and then made this massive transition to move to Southwest Florida right after graduate school. But I think a lot of it just started with just my upbringing, family interactions, and that, I was very into building stuff as a kid, very into Lego building blocks and just how things worked, and always kind of had that background of engineering. My grandfather was a draftsman with Bell back in the day and a couple other companies up in Buffalo back in the heydays in the 1940s and 50s. And I think that just really fed into to my life, kind of that attention to detail and the meticulous nature of things. And, engineering became the place where I landed, after a couple years of school, bounced around from a couple majors, and ultimately found my way to engineering and just loved it, and graduated from undergraduate, went right into master's degree, and found my way down to Southwest Florida.
Both of them in civil engineering or environmental?
Both are in civil engineering with a focus on environmental. Did a lot of my undergraduate and graduate coursework focusing on water, wastewater, a little bit on hazardous waste, and then really expected to be in the water, wastewater industry. Did my master's thesis on wastewater treatment, and just really excited with kind of where all that has led me to today.
Yeah, and how soon after graduate school did you become a registered professional engineer?
I believe it was 3 years. I think that's the minimum that the state of Florida has. Actually, at the time, it was really funny because I was at that cutoff point. I was at 35 months of experience, and somebody on the board said, the guy has 35 months of experience. We can bump him through, because by the time he takes the exam, he's going to have 38 months of experience. So I was fortunate enough to sit for the exam about 3 years after I graduated, passed the exam on the first try, and in 2008 became a registered engineer.
Outstanding. You were already in Florida.
I was already in Florida, yes.
Yeah. So tell me, how did Florida welcome you, and how did you find family?
Yeah. So when I first came down to Florida, my first trip here professionally was to interview with CDM Smith. I had just done my master's thesis defense, and I got on a plane. It's middle of December. I get on a plane, get to Florida, go from freezing cold weather in Buffalo to 78 down here, and I'm like, I had no intentions of taking a job. I'm like, that's a free trip to Florida. I get to, kind of check it out. And by the time I left, I'm like, well, I could stay in New York, and I could definitely work on a lot of older infrastructure and rehabilitation, or I can come down to Fort Myers and, have this beautiful weather and get into kind of a ground floor thing. At the time, just had won the Collier County Wellfield Improvements Program, which I'm sure I'll talk more about in this interview. But that was kind of like that opportunity to put your stamp on something very early in your career was very exciting for me. And then once I got down here, finding community came from church. I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school through high school and a little bit into college. Had been attending a Lutheran church up in New York, so I'm like, I need to find people down here. And I ended up at a Lutheran church in Cape Coral, where I met my wife about a month and a half later, and everyone kept introducing us because we were the youngest people in the congregation. And so we had, multiple opportunities to meet, and I was working at an event they were holding, and somebody's like, why don't you go take her off and grab some lunch together? And so that was our first date. Was at this it was called Oktoberfest in March. So they have all the retirees are down for season, January, February, March, and so they do this big Oktoberfest at the church, and it's a great fundraiser, but it was a really good opportunity to spend some time with my one-day wife.
And how long did it take from that lunch date till the day you got married?
We got married about 12 months later.
Oh.
No, sorry, 15 months later, right? I had to think about that. We dated for about 9 months, got engaged, and then we got married in May of 2006.
Wonderful. I met you, Jason, when I first became regional manager for the south part of Florida, and the first memories that I have of my interactions with you is when I made a call for volunteers to support our corporate social responsibility initiative, CSI, and someone told me there's a young engineer over there who has a passion for this, and I think he can help you out. And you became part of that team, and we did some wonderful things in creating a presence within the community. Mm-hmm. And I know that this is something you have carried with you for all these years in consulting, and I feel so proud that maybe I had a little bit to do with that.
Well, I think you had a big influence in that. I think that's one of the big things that people miss out on in leadership is how do you encourage that next generation to take up the mantle and run with it. You know, people like you, and I think of, I worked with Kirk Martin for a long time and Paul Pino. Those guys really gave me the opportunity to try stuff out. They gave me a lot of room to fail in. And I'm sure I made my mistakes along the way, but those opportunities to grow were amazing, and especially the CSI opportunity to take on a leadership role in an office when you're a person with a year or two experience and you're surrounded by people with 15, 20 years experience, and you're the one driving kind of, hey, let's go hang out, let's go do something good for the community, let's go raise some money for this cause or that cause. It was a really good opportunity. It was a really good way to kind of get myself known within the organization. I mean, within a matter of a couple of years, people higher up were taking notice of me, and I had a lot of really good opportunities to meet some great people within CDM Smith, meet great people on the client side. And so I can't stress enough, the mutual benefit that comes out of programs like that. We do great things for the community, and I think we're rewarded for that with kind of the exposure you get from that.
Yeah, when I took over the area, I must say that I found it a little, I'm going to say the word depressed, lightly depressed. And when we started the CSI program, I noticed some enthusiasm coming out from the rank and file of the company. I remember folks in Miami and Fort Lauderdale telling me, and wives, including, the wives, Andy Baranowski and other people like that, were telling me, this is wonderful. What we're doing here really gave a lot of meaning to our work. Yeah. It's not only engineering, we're contributing to the community, and that really has been rewarded in my own career.
And I'll agree with you. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm on the public side today is that sense of fulfillment you get from serving a bigger purpose. I think so many people, within the consulting field can get very depressed and dejected in what they're doing because you go in there, you crank on work, you're getting paid well, but you're just cranking away on the work, you're turning out work product, you never see the things get built, you're very much separated from the reality of it and the benefit from it. And I think, a big part of what really is a great opportunity is just being able to see kind of your project from start to finish and kind of the benefit that you're giving to the community. Because if you get separated from that, I think that's where the CSI became very valuable, is that it was trying to help the engineers see the connection and the impact that they have in the community, and then allowing people to even have their own passions. I can't remember the woman's name from Fort Lauderdale, but they did the bulletproof vest for the canines for the police department. That was a big thing.
That's the top dog.
Yes.
That's the top
so they really cared about that, and they were able to support that. And I think, when I came into the city, I see a lot of similarities to what was going on in consulting, 15, 20 years ago, with people being just very siloed up in their work. I go into my job, I do my job, I go home, and and I don't want the two to come together. And I think the reality is that what we do is we want those to come together. We want there to be a blending of work and life. I think that's what brings that balance. It's not the separation of the two and giving more time to personal life. I think that's important. I think being refreshed is very important. But I think to separate those two completely and to isolate them really makes one miserable and the other really enjoyable, instead of making them both really joyous.
With the kind of connectivity that we have today, Jason, you get to work from home, you get to do so many things. I think that complementing your financial salary with that emotional salary, which comes from that community service and that community work, I think it's a beautiful mix. And people don't realize how important that is, because the reward ultimately comes to you. Even though you're helping, we worked with women in distress of Broward County, we worked with so many entities, and the rewards that we reaped at the end of the journey were phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And everything showed up at the end at the bottom line. So it was a beautiful formula. So anyways, thank you for that support. I never have expressed it here in an interview, but I want to thank you for having believed in the vision of CSI. This was emulating the CSI program, CSI Miami, CSI Fort Lauderdale, and became a fun thing to do,
Yeah. And I'm really appreciative, for the opportunity to be able to serve in that role. I mean, it goes both ways. Like you were even saying with the serving part of it, being able to be involved in that provided so many benefits to my career that I can't even enumerate today. So.
Yeah. So, Jason, you spend a good 15, 16 years or so working in consulting or more, and then you have a calling to go into public service. Tell me about that transition and how it all happened. I know that I was recruiting you because you're a highly recruitable individual, and everyone wanted Jason to we knew you were going to take a step. We just didn't know where. How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's interesting. At the time, it was 2022. About halfway through the year, I took a leave of absence from CDM Smith. I had kind of gotten to a point where I had achieved everything I thought I could achieve at CDM Smith. We were successful on projects. We were, winning new work. We were doing great projects, but I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't finding fulfillment in that. And so I took a step away and kind of reassessed things. Got to the end of that leave of absence and kind of felt obligated to go back into work immediately. And I ended up at Corollo for a couple of months, and those guys are wonderful people. I'm really grateful for the opportunity they gave me. I think they do a great job. But ultimately, it was Hurricane Ian when that hit Fort Myers in September of 2022. I'd only been with Corollo for a month. I was still trying to get my feet wet, trying to figure out what I was going to do at Corollo. And in an instant, everything that was kind of building went away because everyone was in, okay, rush, we got to get everything back up and running. And I realized at that moment how far away from being able to help I was. I mean, if you don't have ongoing contracts with people, you can call all the people but you really can't offer them anything unless you can work for them. And so I just remember sitting, it was my wife's uncle's house because we had to leave town, and I was watching TV, and City of Fort Myers had no power, no water. The mayor, the city manager, the utilities director were all on TV giving a briefing, and I'm like, why can't I be helping there? Why can't I be helping out? And shortly thereafter, I made contact with the utilities director. We talked about, what it would look like for me to come over to the city. He was able to sell it up the line, and about a month later, I transitioned to come to the city, kind of right after the hurricane, everything's still drying out and still recovering, and kind of coming into a very interesting time for the city.
So it was you're the one who made the first move.
Yep. I can't say that completely because there was a reach out prior to me coming to Corollo about a possibility, but definitely it was, me kind of coming back saying, hey, this consulting thing, I know what that's about. I don't know what the public side's about. I don't understand kind of what my life would look like and how that would be different and how it could help in a different way by being on the public side.
And if you make an assessment of the change itself, now that we're sitting here talking about it, how do you feel?
I feel amazing. This is the most fun, most joy I've had in a job in my life. I've only had a couple of jobs. I was a paper boy when I was really young. I officiated ice hockey for a number of years, and then I moved down here, and I started with CDM Smith, and literally those are the handful of jobs I had. I think I was a lifeguard for a brief period of time too, but this was the most joy I've had. I've seen the most opportunity to make the biggest change and the biggest difference here than what I could do in other fields.
I have to believe that your arrival just after Ian must have been chaotic. Did you guys get a lot of damage that you had to repair immediately? Any emergency moves that you had to make?
So when I came on board, I think the city was very much spared of Ian. It doesn't mean we didn't have damage. We had a lot of damage. We had a lot of significant problems. But when you look at the devastation that happened at Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel, we didn't have that. I mean, I'm sure there are pockets of it. But what we had is we had a utility that was able to recover within about a week or two. We had everything up and running. We were back on regular power for facilities. We were in full operation in our wastewater facilities within a couple of days. We were back with the water plant, I think, within a week. So from that standpoint, we were in really good shape. Where we were really hurting, and this is just a really interesting story of kind of like coming into a storm. So Public Works, Public Utilities here is a separate department, but it hasn't always been that way. It is separated, the two departments separated on paper about 2 years before I arrived. And when I got there, it was kind of like the final dividing line, because now they had a Public Works city engineer, a Public Utilities city engineer. And so I came in, we had 2 consent orders. We had just gotten the second one to bring 11 new wells online in 2 years. We had 85 active projects. I had 2 project managers working for me. And day one, the first project manager quits. He's like, I'm leaving. I think it was a combination of Hurricane Ian and just opportunity. He's like, I'm leaving. Started in November, so, Thanksgiving's there, come back from Thanksgiving. The second project manager comes in and is like, I'm quitting. So I went from having myself and 2 project managers managing 85 projects down to myself managing 85 projects and trying to get more things started and more things out the door because we were so far behind on some of our consent order projects. And so we've made it through. We've been able to restaff in a very interesting way. We found some very unique talent, and we're making a lot of progress, but it was chaos. And it still is chaos to some degree with regard to the Hurricane Ian. I think some of the impacts that come from municipality after the fact are all the funding opportunities that are available. And so you're trying to get the most out of funding. There's things that you can do to harden your facilities and it makes stuff more resilient long term. And so we're constantly being given more opportunities, but with every opportunity comes more paperwork and more things you got to pull together.
Has bureaucracy frustrated you at the city, or have you been able to liberate some of those hurdles, bringing that experience from the private sector?
I don't think I've been able to liberate anything. I don't think I've been able to change any process. And I think, Richard Moulton is our public work or utilities director. Great leader. He's constantly reminding me of things are going to frustrate you. He's always checking me, like, are you frustrated? I'm like, I'll be quiet for a few days. Like, you frustrated? I'm like, no, I'm just working really hard on what's going on today. But there's a cognizance of like, hey, you came from this world here and you could get things done really quickly. And in the municipal side, it's more difficult. It takes more time. And for me, it's just been a reminder of it's diligence. It's knowing when things are due, knowing how the paperwork needs to get filled out, and just doing it. One of the big things that I'm driving for within our organization right now is developing standard operating procedures. So we have a lot of really great process and protocols and policies that are in people's heads. I get that as a regular thing if people tell me, oh, this is our policy. I'm like, okay, where's that written down? How can I share that with somebody like a developer? Well, no, this is just always what we've done.
Yes.
Like, well, that's not really a policy then. But the idea is to get that codified so that, when the opportunity, comes, if I get elevated up in position or if I leave for whatever reason, that I can leave behind me a set of guidance and procedures that are going to help whoever comes in there do this more efficiently and not have that struggle of getting up, that learning curve.
Yeah. In your current priorities, let's talk about your current priorities. What is job one for Jason Sciandra?
So job one, my primary responsibility as the city engineer is to make sure our capital improvements program is going. And within that, it's so focused on consent order work. We have 3 active consent orders. 2 of them are very large active consent orders. One's on our well field expansion. The other's for our wastewater facilities. These are long-term, the water one we're about to close out. I'm very excited about that. But the wastewater one's going to go on at least till 2028, possibly longer than that. But the reality of it is keeping those projects moving, managing all the stuff that goes on with those projects, leading, and mentoring my project managers to make sure they're learning and growing in that process. So that's number one. And then number 2 is developing those SOPs. I want to make sure that we have the material and the documentation that helps our people who come in, new people, and helps them grow very quickly. And then right after that is going to be digital transformation. It's a digital roadmap we developed recently, and then we're going to use that to do SCADA upgrades. We're going to look at CMMS upgrades, and then ultimately asset management is a big priority of ours. We do a little bit of that. We want to become better at that. And so I said those are kind of the priorities that we're looking at these days.
It sounds quite exciting. I think that establishing those SOPs will be something good to leave behind, because I have to believe that your job is to work yourself out of a job, making sure that, you know, in the case you wouldn't be here, the city would continue to run efficiently in the CIP.
I can't remember the book. I think it might have been Good to Great, but there's this concept of, two types of leaders. You have the charismatic leader who leads by being very charismatic and saying the right things, and then you have the clock building leader who kind of sets up all the procedures and processes and has a system going. So when they leave, the organization doesn't fall on its face. If I am the driving force behind the city of Fort Myers transformation, growth, development, whatever it is in utilities, if I'm the person that everything relies on and I leave, everything collapses. And I don't want that to happen. I want to leave behind me a strong team who knows their role, knows how to do their jobs well, and has the tools they need to continue moving this forward and continue going back and editing those, SOPs and guidance documents as they learn new things.
Yeah. Jason, you have a storm around the corner. And when I first came to your office today, I saw you on a telephone call that sounded pretty serious, but it sounded that you were having fun, preparing for this. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of your job?
Yeah, so it's definitely nice being on this side. You see all those aspects of storm preparation. Our storm preparation is constant. Whether we're in season or out of season. Last fall we were going through different FEMA trainings, getting our certifications, getting ready for all that. It's planning out the purchases that need to be done to have the right equipment in place for that. And then, from June 1st on, we're constantly in a state of readiness for whatever might come. So today's just another example of, there's a large rain event expected this weekend, and it's what can we do within our utility to make ourselves ready for this event? Is it drawing down lift stations? Is it, working at the plants to make sure things are buttoned up for all the construction projects going on? Whatever it is that's going to allow us to weather that storm best, we're talking about that. We're talking about what worst case scenario. If this happens, what are we going to do? If we get hit, this turns into some kind of major event, and the county activates their emergency operation plan, and we have to send people to the EOC, and I have to get called in to go to our EOC. What does that look like, and how are we going to be ready to respond in that moment? So it's a constant state of vigilance and practice. And these events are really great because if this thing doesn't hit us and just passes over to the side, we've had that experience of going through that process of, okay, what are we going to do?
Yeah, part of the resiliency you're trying to build, that readiness. So it's certainly an exciting thing. When you transitioned to public service, you obviously had to take a pay cut. But I can sense that the emotional salary that you're collecting here has complemented and probably surpassed the stimulation that you had from just money. Would you agree with that?
I cannot agree with that. I'm kidding. I have to be frank because, I think there's multiple sides to that. I don't want people to think that, the salary sacrifice that comes along with this is something that's taken lightly. I've been very blessed in my life. I think when I was at CDM Smith, they always took care of me. And I think that's something I learned from that process is like the money wasn't always there when you thought it should be there. You like, I should get a raise. This person's making this, I should make that. And it didn't happen that way. But for me, the reality of this is I know the city is going to take care of me long term. And I think the really amazing thing, and this is very much about my faith, is like God's always provided for us. And even in taking this job, never once have I really felt the pressure of a financial squeeze, like, oh man, I don't know if this was the right thing to do. Yeah. And so I think from that standpoint, because provision is there and because I'm not worrying about finances, it's been a burden lifted off my back. It was something that definitely I had to convince my wife that this was going to be a good idea and things are going to be so much better. But I agree with you on the side of the emotional capital, the emotional payout that comes with doing a job well done and feeling fulfilled in that does compensate somewhat.
In implementation in your CIP, what are the biggest hurdles that you have at the moment? Absence of contractors, not enough contractors out there, sufficient engineering support. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the two big things that we're facing right now, and they're intertwined together. One is an absence of contractors. We have done a number of different things. We've tried different processes. We're going to continue trying different processes. We, for a long time, had followed Lee County's model of doing construction manager at risk. They did the JetBlue Park back in like 2012, and I think once they did that and it was successful, we grabbed that idea and ran with it for a good 10 years. And when I came on board, one of the biggest challenges was we weren't getting CMARs to come after our work anymore. We get one or two firms to go after a major plant upgrade or a deep injection well project. And so we had to come up with a different idea and a different strategy. We've done so far 2 progressive design build contracts, one for our candor work on the wastewater side and one for our well field expansion. We're toying around with a fixed price design build that we'll advertise later on this year, and we're always open to other mechanisms, different ways to make people interested in what's going on here. And so I think a lot of that is it's what kind of contracts we can put out there. We want to be ultimately a preferred client for people. We want people to want to do business with the city of Fort Myers. I think so many municipalities look at themselves as being like, we're the 800-pound gorilla and everyone's going to come want to work for us because we've got these major projects. Well, that might be true for a Miami-Dade or even a city of Cape Coral who's doing these massive utility expansion projects. At the city of Fort Myers, our projects aren't that big. We don't play in that field, and so we have to approach it differently. And I think what we do, how we address that is I think we are a very fair and open playing field. I've tried to kind of pull back the curtain on the procurement process. I use very active on LinkedIn. I like to put out there, hey, these are the solicitations we have coming out. This is when they're advertising. And if you want to set up a meeting with me, contact me.
I have noticed that, and I want to congratulate you for it. I think this is admirable, what you've been doing, being completely open book. This is us. We need you. These are our challenges. Come work with us. Come grow with us. I think that's a very good message. We at Ardura, we take it seriously. We feel that there are opportunities here, but I think that it really boils down to your personality and the management style that you have tried to establish here within the city. So thank you for that. Jason, let's talk a little bit about the lessons you have learned in your career and the legacy that you would like to leave behind.
Yeah.
After you have your time here within the city. What would you tell a young professional in the STEM field thinking of a career in engineering and possibly a career in public service?
Yeah. So I would say, the biggest thing for me about my career, my experience, and you alluded to that, it's the payback on doing what you like to do. If you're not doing what you like to do, don't do it. Go find something else. Go find what you like to do. Find where your passion is at. And I think for me, it took years to kind of come around to that conclusion because money was such a big driver. It's like, I need money for this, this, and this. And I think the reality is the money will follow where you're happy with. If you're happy doing what you're doing and you feel rewarded by that, the money is going to be there because you're going to be putting out such great work product that people will pay you for that. So I think that's a big factor. And the other thing is, nothing's going to come easy for you. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. It's going to be hard work. Whatever you get into, it's going to be hard. I'm trying to convince my kids of that right now.
Yeah.
They have ideas that, well, I don't want to do this because that's going to be really hard. I don't want to do that because it's going to be really. I'm like, no, if you really want to be the best at whatever you do, it's going to be hard. If you want, I enjoy running, and I know that to be the best runner possible means you're going to put in a lot of mileage. There's no shortcut to it. There's no, I'm going to go do sprints this day and this. I'm like, no. If you want to be good at it, you practice, you put the time in, and a career comes out of that. And I think that's really, if you look back on my career, that's what happened, is putting the time in and being in the right place. And the other part was a lot of luck. There was a lot of people in front of me who, for one reason or another, stepped to the side and changed positions and created opportunities. But if I wasn't ready, and if I didn't have that skill set when those opportunities presented themselves, I never would have realized the opportunity. I never would have capitalized on it.
You got to act on it.
Correct.
And you got to find what feels right. If you're not doing the right thing, if you're not happy, you're not doing the right thing.
Agreed.
That's the bottom line. So, Jason, I have known you for all these years, and I know that the appreciation of a lot of senior leaders in the company for you was great. Any special mentors in your life that really made a difference and that really changed the course of where you were going that you would like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, no, I'm very grateful to all the mentors I had. I'm going to pat you on the back for a second. Not
sir.
that you were looking for that one, but I remember you and I in the parking lot at, it was CDM at the time. It was 2006, I believe it, probably around that time frame. And I had just taken the GMAT exam to go to graduate school, going to get an MBA, and I'm like, do I stay with CDM or do I quit and go full-time to school? You know, because I had scores that were supportive of some very high-end schools, and you're like, look, you're going to get a great education wherever you go, but the real education is going to come from the job. And that was really good guidance. It was really good wisdom because it allowed me to stay in the field that was really where I was meant to be in, and allowed me to grow and allowed me to gain a lot of skills that, you know, ultimately paid off very well for me long term. So I'm really appreciative of the ULU.
Thank you, sir.
I would be remiss without giving, you know, definite, you know, acknowledgement to, you know, Kirk Martin. You know, you and I both know Kirk, known him for a number of years.
He's an institution.
I'm very fortunate to still work with him today on a number of our well projects, but kind of coming up under him, learning a lot of well stuff. I was never a hydrogeologist. I was never a great well guy, but I could understand those concepts, and a lot of that came because of the time he spent with me and the investment he made. And then Paul Pino, we spent a good, I think, 10 to 12 years together, you know, side by side. He was a great mentor, you know, really coached me on a lot of things, really encouraged me on how to be more client focused and client relationship focused, because he acknowledged the fact that I was really good at the business side of it, but he wanted to be good at the people side of it too. And he was just a great example of that, and so grateful for the mentorship and the friendship. I mean, he and I still get together on a regular basis and catch up, and it's great to have people like that in your life.
I have to echo the words that you've said for those guys. I mean, I couldn't have more appreciation for both of them. You know, they really were, like I told you, institutions. You know, Paul brought that public service type of trait, you know, to the mix, which really made it very exciting. So anyways, Jason, thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. I know your message is going to sound loud and clear to a lot of young people looking for a career in engineering. I noticed that the engineering field is changing. I see a lot of women coming into our field, which is very exciting. I think that the combination of men and women working together in engineering is only making the profession a lot more stimulating. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree completely. So I have 4 daughters. So I'm very encouraged to see the strides women have made into engineering. It's very interesting. You know, we spend a lot of time with Florida Gulf Coast University, which is a local university here. Great engineering program. But to see the dynamics, you know, between the men and the women, you know, in terms of the numbers, you know, we definitely a lot more women coming out of the program. Very highly knowledgeable, highly skilled. We've had 2 interns here in the past year. One was from FGCU, another was from Florida Polytechnic, but both women, both highly intelligent. And I'm very impressed just by kind of the people coming into the field and the balance that brings. I'm very excited for what that means for my daughters in terms of having a career. You know, one of my daughters wants to be a geologist, so I think that's very exciting to know that the path is being blazed now, which is going to provide that opportunity for them in the future.
It feels good, doesn't it?
It feels great.
Yeah. So, folks, this has been an exciting interview with a young professional that I met in the beginning of the century who has now become the utilities engineer for the city of Fort Myers, Mr. Jason Sciandra. Jason, I want to thank you for having spent some time with me this afternoon, for those pearls of wisdom that you have shared with us, and also the things that made you who you are today. I want to wish you the best in the career. I'm excited to see people like you on the utility side, because I know the quality of the work that you did in the consulting side, and I know that you have taken a lot of good skills to the city, so I congratulate the city also for having selected such a quality candidate. I know you're going to deliver some good things for them, and I wish you the best in the future.
I thank you so much for the compliments and really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Elliot. Thank you.
And to everyone, please join us for a future podcast where I'll be continuing to bring you exciting news about our profession, just like I did today with Jason Sciandra here in the city of Fort Myers. And I will see you in the next edition of your Erizo TV podcast. Thank you and have a great afternoon.